Good afternoon. This roundtable hearing conducted by the Committee on Appropriations and Adjudication will now come to order. Notice of the roundtable hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets via electronic format on Thursday, the 19th of January, with a second notice provided on Monday, January the 30th. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the legislature's website. This afternoon, this roundtable will deal with one issue. It's a proposed bill that has not, underline that, has not been introduced. And the intent of this roundtable is to make sure that I properly cross all my T's and dot my I's before we introduce it, and to just hear from everybody that's involved or has an interest in this. And so with that, I guess I could go through. I understand that the public auditor has some place to go, so why don't we just go ahead and start? If I can invite the public auditor up, Jay and Glenn. Joey, Mr. Cowell, and Mr. Camacho, if you just all come up. I have specific questions to ask of most of the others. But inasmuch as the public auditor is here and she has to run to a training in about a half hour, I'll allow her to just kind of make some opening comments about her reaction to the bill and whether or not she supports the idea of this kind of an idea and what the impact is going to be on various things that are going on. And so, Madam Auditor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker and fellow senators. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm appreciative of the fact that you are holding this roundtable. And I'm just going to speak more specifically to the funding area and what has happened over the years with the Guam Highway Fund. The Guam Highway Fund gets in about $19 million a year from taxes. This is called the liquid fuel tax, and then licenses and permits. And in FY 2011, we had a highway bond issue to the tune of about over $100 million, which we all paid off in FY 2011. And since that time, over the years, in the last 5 years, what has happened is that slowly, we are funding like the highway division, transportation division, some areas like capital projects of Department of Public Works. We fund from that fund Guam Regional Mass Transit. But what has happened, and especially in 2015, is that a lot of non-highway related projects are being funded. A good portion of it went to the mayors last year, about over $2.5 million. Another portion, another $4.5 million went to the Department of Education. $1 million for the last several years has been going to the Department of Revenue and Taxation. So what we see is that last year was the largest amount, where almost 50% of the total expenditures of the highway fund went to non-highway related projects. And so the problem, of course, I know, being the chair of appropriations, is the juggling. And so the question becomes, the highway fund, as it was originally intended, does have the means and the funding, but with the slow erosion of funding non-highway projects, it becomes the challenge then, how are we going to fund the bill if non-highway projects begin to continue to be funded out of the highway fund? So that's really the issue. You're talking about a $50 million bond. One of the challenges is that enough? And maybe the director of DPW can speak to that. Just to let everyone know, OPA is starting an audit on DPW's highway maintenance program, because maintenance is an issue that has not really been factored into the preservation of our highways. And we see a lot of roads being eaten, Mother Nature taking over because of the lack of proper and ongoing maintenance. So in this bill, we want to consider having funding for ongoing and continued maintenance so that the life of the roads can be further prolonged, because if roads are not properly maintained, they will deteriorate faster. So that's another element we want possibly for this measure to consider. As I mentioned, we're just starting the audit, so we're not yet in a position to say what are our issues with respect to the highway maintenance portion. So, but in sum, I think the people, the fact that all the mayors are here and many of them have been screaming, for funding, and I know a lot of the highway project, the federally highway funded projects are for major roads, and we get about another $25 million for that area, which has,
15.
but it's altogether with the funding of your office and so on, it's closer to 20 million in total for for administration and so on. Yeah. So, but still, and that's a good help. And it's hard to say what the Trump administration is going to provide in the form of infrastructure funding. That might be another source that might increase, but again, that's still kind of down the road. But overall, I think there is a need, and if you keep the highway fund intended for the purpose of which it was, then the funding is there. The challenge you're going to have as a legislature is all those other monies. Where are you going to find the funding for that? That's going to be the ongoing challenge. But I am supportive. We are supportive of this because we do see the need. I think all of us travel throughout different parts of Guam, and me coming from the south, I know my mayor in Iran will speak. I can say I can remember that road when I was in high school, and 50 years later, it still hasn't been repaired. So, and the only other thing is who's going to determine the priority of which road gets funded first. That's going to be, and I jokingly said to the mayor, who's going to get funded first? But yes, this is a capital improvement project. It is not for operations. That's what debt should be used for capital infrastructure. And so, in principle, we are supportive of this measure.
And I'm glad you made that distinction between capital improvement projects and operations. I'm just wondering, and maybe Mr. Rojas will address this separately, if we include maintenance of current highways, does that change the complexion of the bond from CIP to, does that then become operational? I'm not sure. I'll more specifically address that to Jay and Tina in later when I have my questions to Gita, because I know that I heard Glenn on the radio this morning, so I was ready to address that, and I'm glad that you broached it before he did, because then, as long as you're still here, I wanted to know whether or not you thought that there was a distinction and whether or not we should be careful about that. And that's the only thing that I wanted to.
From the accounting vernacular, maintenance is separate from capital, and I think the highway fund itself has sufficient revenues if it's dedicated to highway-related projects to include maintenance, to have a set aside for maintenance, to include, I'm always on my mayor in PD, when are you going to mow the road? When? And they said, that's DPW's area, that's DPW's area. Well, when are they going to do it? Because you used to be able to jog on there, now you can't, because we Mother Nature's encroaching or taking over the road. So that is always something we have to take care of, and we can, and I'm sure all of us are going to have our pet areas of what we want to see improve, what we want to see maintain. So, but overall, the funding is there from the current highway fund, the challenge this legislature is going to face is those non-highway funded projects. Highway-related projects for the repayment.
No, I actually, well, first off, good afternoon. Just wanted to find out what exactly this body wanted to do. And from Gita's standpoint, you know, we will work to be able to get the funds that are required. There are a few things within the bill as it's written, you know, that we would like to comment on as we do go a little further into it. But, you know, as we look at it, the big question that we have is essentially, of course, the funding source, how much we are going to be looking at to be able to cover the debt service that's required. There are some limitations that we do have just to be able to make sure that we are covering the debt service by, you know, essentially 2 times the amount to be able to make sure that debt service is in there. We are happy to see that the statutory lien has been placed on that. You know, the market is very different for us these days after the passage of PROMESA. And something that we are looking at from our investors is that statutory lien does help us to be able to kind of go out and sell the bond when it's required. The only other issue that we want to be able to kind of to mention is in the legislation as it's written right now, we do have that limitation on the cap of 5%. We want to essentially kind of discuss with the legislature essentially to kind of take a look at that 5% limitation. Just because of the way the bond market is these days, there may be some reason why we actually do not get an interest rate that's actually below 5%, which will make it very difficult for us once we get time to pricing to be able to kind of find that out. Using 5% as a base is one thing, but writing it into the statute where we're forced to be able to look at it, you know, no higher than a 5% interest rate, that does make it a little more difficult because we're not really going to know what that interest rate is until we get closer to pricing.
Okay, are there any other things in the bill? Actually, the bill purposely was not introduced because I wanted to get those questions out. Get you to comment on what kind of improvements you wanted to make on the bill more specifically. We now have the 5% that you want to address. Is there anything else in there that?
The inclusion of the statutory lien is the other. So, you know, that's essentially taken care of. In your section 1504.1 limited obligation highway bonds, et cetera, you know, one of the things that's not in here as far as subsection E is the inclusion of whether or not we do want to create a reserve fund for the debt service. That's one thing that we might want to consider. And that's actually not listed in the language that you currently have in the statute as or the legislation as proposed. In some cases it's required, but what we're looking at is, you know, in this new market that we're essentially going to when we do actually go out to fund these bonds, we want to be able to make sure that we do have everything covered if necessary. So if we have the costs for the reserve fund in there, whether we need it or not, having it in there, you know, in our back pocket, or to be able to use the funds towards that is something that we would also like to see in there.
Yeah, can you prepare the language? That
yeah, we can absolutely make some edits and then you know bring it up to you in discussion prior.
Yeah,
to
I mean
the
that's why this is done this way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
And so, because under our new rules, if it changed, I would have to have a second hearing. So, I thought if we did this ahead of time and we introduced a bill that was fairly clean, and there wouldn't be very many major amendments to it, then we could get it out a lot quicker than if I just threw it out that day and you came in with you need to take this and they take that, and then people saying, well, you only had a bill that came out and says that it wasn't supposed to be 5%. Yeah. This is completely different when you remove that cap,
Mm-hmm.
and whether or not we can and should move forward. So you would have to address. We would want that in the bill that finally goes out, so that when people testify, they can say, if it was still at 5%, we would support it. Anything above 5% is,
We would be more than happy to collaborate with you on that.
Okay.
You know, and once we actually do move forward as far as, you know, with these discussions, with the comments that we would have on how the language should be written, you know, we'll sit down with you or anyone who actually wants to be able to take a look at some of that language. Having that 5% in there, you know, is something that we can start off with as a starting point. But again, if it's written into the statute and we end up with a 5.05% interest rate when we do go to market, then that puts us in a very difficult situation, which we don't want to be in. You know, essentially, if in the past week, we've had the Virgin Islands actually go out with the sale of a bond, and then they pulled back on that bond itself, which was pretty detrimental to their rating. And that's something that we do not want to have happen to us. But if we're limited to that 5%, we can use that for planning purposes to kind of go from there. And of course, when we do go to market, we'll, you know, do what we can responsibly to be able to make sure that that interest rate is going to be something that we can work with.
okay. But all of these are suggestions that I'd like to take into account, and as the public auditor stated, I mean, there was 19 million. I'm not sure why the EBR has 17 this time. For the first time, you've actually undercut me. And, okay. So I'm not sure why, but we have sufficient money to service this loan, even if it's twice the amount that is necessary, as you suggest. We're just going to have to get a little more creative in where because just this last year, in the current budget, about 12 million goes to DPW out of that. 3 million goes to Guam Rapid Transit, and I know they've complained that they need more. The mayor's got 2, and street lights we're going to have to talk about. Most of it, I mean, it's not, admittedly, there's $1.5 million that doesn't look like highway going to university or GCC for manpower training, but the majority of 90% of it is actually going to something related to the highways and people around the highways. But if we have to take out and say 5 million a year set aside,
Well, let me just kind of clarify that when we start talking about the additional bonds test that we'd be looking at for coverage of this debt, we essentially say that the pool taxes would be used for this debt and our collections are at 9 million. We can't accurately say that our coverage is going to be at 3.5, 3.8 times whatever it may be, with the difference in what we collect versus what we pay out for the debt service, because that 9 million is not dedicated towards this debt service for everything else that we say. So when we start to take a look at the rest of our budget, all of that would have to be secondary to the bond debt service.
of course. I mean,
that,
like with
so,
everything else, everything is always secondary to.
And based on the auditor's statement, we have to be able to make sure that money that's set aside for this debt service would be, again, set aside for this debt service, and that no additional legislation would be introduced to be able to violate the funding source.
And however you want to word that is something that we would look at.
What's the amount that's needed to service a $50 million debt?
Initial calculations that we do have for a $50 million debt would put us at debt service at about $3.5 million on average. 3.5, yes. And we'd be looking at a 25-year period. And that's based on the 5%. Would be in addition to that. So this is without it. This would actually be reserved. Bump it up, not double
Bump it
it.
up probably 4 or 5 at most.
4 or 5 at most for the actual debt service itself. That's actually a little high, but we'd have to secure at least twice that to be able to have the market actually be comfortable with it.
Okay. Sure.
Clarify, earlier you said we need to make sure that we have in the fund 2 times the amount, but then later you said 3.8%. Can you just?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the 3.8%. If we're looking at the total 19 million that we'd have in that sum, I was doing some calculations of 3.5, 3.8, almost 4 times,
Okay.
to kind of look at it from that standpoint. So that's what we have totally to dedicate to this itself. But as was previously said earlier, some of that money has already been allocated to other areas, so we can't exactly use that as coverage for debt service. But
Thank you.
a 2 times debt service is pretty much accurate. The more we have to cover the debt, the lower the interest rate would be. See what I mean? So it's all about exactly how we can package it to be able to sell it to the investors. If we have more money to cover the $3.5 million, then they would look at it better, where we can actually probably negotiate a lower interest rate.
Does Gita have any suggestion as to how they would structure this? Would there be a cap I? Would there be whatever? On how you want to do this?
I don't think we'd really have actually kind of looked into the actual structure itself until, we can take a look at the full use. Once the funding source again is there, then we'd probably take a look at what the main areas are. If we're looking at cap I, if we're looking at reserve funds, if we're looking at, funding additional maintenance to kind of go from there, we'd kind of have to take a look at how to break it down. And we could break it down anyway. That would be authorized.
And what would you figure would be the net proceeds for 50 million?
For 50 million, we're probably looking at about 46 to 47 million to kind of go from there. Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking more like 40, as opposed, if you capitalize interest, you reserve money, all
Yep.
of those, then your amount is going to be lower, closer to 40 million.
Yeah, and that's actually something that as we move further in the discussions, we can start breaking down the numbers as to what they would be. But again, the important piece would be, one, the funding source for the debt service and how much we can actually allocate towards that debt service as it is to be able to get those figures out.
I think with everybody's understanding of where it currently is, I think we can find whatever amount that you feel is necessary to set
And-
aside.
And we can do the same once it's decided exactly how much we would be looking to go to market for.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions of Gita? I see my conscience has arrived. I'll introduce all my colleagues. Senator Espaldon, who has been the last two budgets, has reminded me you keep spending money out of these dedicated fund for things that aren't part of the dedicated fund. So you have an ally there about, and he's constantly, and Senator Regine Bisco-Lee, Senator Tom Etta, Senator Luis Borja-Muñoz, and Senator Chalina Cruz Nelson, Senator Tommy Morrison, Senator Therese Tulahi, and Senator Fernando Estevez. Anybody else have any questions of Gita before we move on to Public Works? No? You're happy with that? Okay.
Just one thing, and unfortunately, we don't have the AG here, but we're looking at ultimately having to raise fuel taxes, correct? To generate this revenue.
I'm not making that proposal, though I hear that some are talking about it. We have either 19 to 17 million currently.
Correct. From fees that haven't been adjusted for the past 30 years.
Correct. And so I know that there has been suggestions, I won't say from who, that it be increased. And whoever wants to make that suggestion can make it. And I'm hoping that in the roundtable, that maybe somebody's going to suggest that be done. As the good senator put it, it hasn't been adjusted in 30 years. If anybody wants to address that issue at some point, we'll take that into consideration. But that is the amount that we're talking about. I was surprised last night to see that the amount has gone from 19 to 17. I'll ask the question as to why that happened when we get to rev and tax, but
Well,
it might need be.
yeah, actually, I'm kind of puzzled as to if we're not gonna adjust those fuel taxes, how else are we gonna generate those revenues, the additional $5 million a year? But the ultimate point of my question is that of course we have an existing law that if we're gonna raise any of those taxes, it has to go out in a referendum, correct? Yeah.
No, I mean, it's an excellent question. It has to be asked, but I mean, it wasn't in the original proposal, and the reason why we had the roundtable rather than the hearing was these questions have to be brought up, and the question of whether or not there's going to be a separate piece of legislation for that, or would it, I'm not even sure if it would have passed standing rule muster to include it in this one with the two parts. So I don't know. But this one was just the idea of floating and trying to see where we were at with that to address the needs that I'm sure Mr. Leon Guerrero will now expound on.
Thank you, Speaker, Senators. I just want to say that. Sorry. Okay. Thank you for having this venue for us to talk about highways. As I've been here in this position for 2 years, I noticed that one of the things that people are really passionate about are our roadway systems, and as the public auditor had mentioned, one of the things that we aren't very good at or we haven't done a good job is on maintenance. So not only on capital improvement projects that we need, but also on maintenance projects. So I would like to reiterate that if we can, as this is a roundtable discussion, that we put everything on the table and hopefully give good information so that as you decide and deliberate what we should do or could do, we'd come up with a program that not only benefits the people of Guam, but also gives us something that is sustainable as we move forward. I've said all along, and I would like to propose that we don't leave that out of the table of increasing liquid fuels tax. Not just that because it hasn't been updated since for 30 years, but we're one of the lower taxed communities in the nation, and I think that anywhere between 1, 2, or 3, or even 5 cents per gallon. Last year we picked up about 45 million gallons, or we sold 45 million gallons of gas, and 43 million gallons of gas, and 45 million gallons of jet fuel. And I think I can't remember the diesel, but at the end of the day, I think that we can generate enough revenue to do something that's sustainable. Fund this program and then continue on so that we're able to address our road infrastructure.
How much would you need for maintenance annually?
Sir, for the 400 plus miles of roadway for secondary and tertiary and 156 miles of routed roads, our guess is that, our estimates is that we would need about $30 million, and I realize a year annually, to robustly and take care of all of our roads and our roadway systems. I realize that's expensive, and so I'm not proposing that. Yes.
That was your suggestion.
But I'm not just pulling that out of the air, as Speaker. We did a study, as you saw, I know you've seen it, the village study, village street studies, and that was how we determined there was 800 plus miles of secondary and tertiary roads. We did that back in 2010, and the cost to repair the roads, and it was an extensive study. We went through all but maybe 3 or 4 mayors at the time, and they got all the roads, and that costed about somewhere about $800 million back in 2010. So you count for inflation, $1 billion maybe, I don't know, and that's just secondary and tertiary roads. Again, we haven't done any maintenance. We've got our agreement with the Federal Highway is that they would do major road repairs and do new roads as we did with Teton Highway. But it's our responsibility to maintain the roads, and we haven't done that. So I'd like to begin and start that. But yes, yes. But sir, my proposal has been, and I proposed this last year at our budget meetings, is that if you give me a couple, if you increase it by 2 cents or 3 cents, and give me $2 million is what basically I'm asking on an annual basis. Tell me, if you want to tell me which roads you want me to repair, I can do that. If you want to leave that up to me, I'm happy to do that as well, and I'm accountable. I'd be happy to report to you. I'm very proud of the people at DPW. Granted, we only have 26 people that actually can do road work, and if we do road work, that brings us up to about $500,000 to $750,000 per mile. If I were to go and contract that out to somebody like Hawaiian Rock or Black Construction, it's going to cost me about $1.5 million for a 2-lane highway, so $1.5 million per mile. So I think we can reduce costs. I think we probably, because we're so far behind the power curve, that we do need this $50 million, or whatever lump sum that we can start with, and then chip away at the roadways so that they become safe again, and then we begin to properly maintain and manage our roadway systems.
So we've been trying to distinguish between operations, which is, I guess, covering up potholes and whatnot. I guess that will qualify as operations, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And when we talk about funds for capital improvements, is that actually like laying new asphalt in areas in the villages that, right now it's just kaskahu, and when it rains it gets washed away?
No, I'm talking, when the roads are designed, or we can design roads that will last 15 years or 20 years. What I'd like to do is once we do a road repair, major road repair or construction, we don't come back to it for 15 years. That way we can get moving on with the rest of the island. And to do that properly, you need to not only do the subsurface work, but you need to seal it with asphalt, which we can't do.
Right. Okay, but I guess I'm just trying to get clear in my mind what deficiency we're trying to address with this proposed $50 million borrowing, because we know that a large part of our roads are torn up. We go out there, we build a new road using federal money usually, and then GWA comes in behind that and starts digging up the road, and and the repair that is done is really, you know, in about 12 months, that thing is
It gets worse.
it gets worse, yeah. But I know that I believe there's a law in place that, you know, they have to hold those contractors, and I think it was about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, DPW actually put a squeeze on the utilities and said, hey, you know, you guys fix that up or else you're not going to get any permits anymore to do anything. And they came out and they fixed a lot of those things. So if we were to hold the people who's actually damaging the roads to their, you know, to their responsibility, then this need for this much money may actually be reduced. And that way we can actually focus in the villages.
It will, Senator. There's no doubt about that. But also, there are, like, if I use Marine Corps Drive as a perfect example. We looked at it. It was again, it was dangerous because people were driving off the road onto the shoulders. People were walking and running, or they'll go into the oncoming lane or the middle lane or so, and we said, okay, this is a safety issue. We actually got the Federal Highways to give us $750,000 to do the repair, and that repair work we did was patchwork. Now today, if you look at it, the repair work is still holding, but what's not holding is the areas that we weren't patching, and typically when we over the course of a 20-year span of the lifetime of a roadway, we should be going back there, if not every 6 or 7 years, but at least maybe even if not every 5 years, then at least 6 or 7 years to mill it and then take off the top layer, the anti-skid, and then lay on another layer, and that's the cost figures I'm giving you basically are just repair costs. I'm not talking about brand new roads. If I'm going to talk about a brand new road, the Federal Highway for a 3-lane, it's upwards of $12-15 million a mile.
So that milling, is that operations or CIP?
From an accounting standpoint, I don't know. I don't know what it would be from a bonding standpoint. But from my standpoint with the Federal Highways, they say milling is maintenance. Because we're doing it for 20 years. They built it for 20 years. We got to maintain it for 20 years. But we can. I don't know from an accounting. I don't know if there's ways to look at it and say that it is major road repair and call it a project and capitalize it.
I want to thank you, Director, and the DPW team working closely with my office for the past year and seeing how we could also come up with some solutions to address this one, I'm understanding close to $1 billion Village Streets Master Plan. I'm echoing through some of our meetings with the Deputy Director, it's high time speaking towards the new equipment that you have that was able to showcase that DPW doing this in-house could accomplish. If we're talking about two-way or two-lane roads, we've proven it with Chalan Lamasu, Royalty, Damien Street, and there's others that have showcased this. So I wanted to bring this up to allow you to talk about it as well, because there's some reason why we were staying consistent with your previous proposals in past budgets of seeking $2 million to continue this efforts, because you have these equipments available and the capacity in-house to do this. Now, you did confirm that if you were to outsource this, or if you outsource, it will cost up to $2 million per mile.
1.5.
1.5.
Yes.
And based on doing this in-house, it costs about $150,000 to $180,000 or $200,000
per mile. It'd be half a
per mile.
million.
So maybe $300,000 per mile then. About close to $300,000 per mile.
Half a million per mile.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
500,000.
if we look at the examples of Masu and Derido, Roy, Damien Street, and if you were able to have that set aside or $2 million in your budget to address this, you would look to be able to do at least these two-way lane roads from 5 to 7 miles annually if you had that.
Yes.
5 to 7.
Yes. And that's a good point, Senator, because, again, what I want to emphasize is I only have 26 employees that can actually do that. So that reduced cost can only go so far. They can't do, say, if we want them to do all of Route 4 from Elig to Umatic, that's a 1.5 year project for them, and they're not able to touch anything else because that's what they'd be focusing on. If it's just the subsurface work that they're going to repair on.
If $50 million was approved, I know you kind of spoke in pieces and how you probably plan to use this, but how would DPW approach this? Because you have this $2 million approach, and you've proven you can do that. If you look at the numbers, if you can do up to 100 or 5 to 7 miles annually with $2 million set aside, and if you were to stick to that process, with $50 million, you can do close to 166 miles throughout the island if you were to do it all in-house. So I'm just thinking, would $50 million be used to set aside for having the equipment available, having all the equipment available, and just using $50 million to purchase asphalt and needed materials and supplies, or if you were to use $50 million and based on your calculations, I would do 50 miles rather than 166 miles.
I'm thinking if we get the total 50 or 47 million, whatever that amount is, for DPW, we're looking at building roads for at least 2 to 3 years. So it's going to take us that long, maybe even 5 years, for us to complete the expenditure of that bond money and to be building roads. Obviously, we could go and do 10 or 20 projects at once. I don't think I don't think our economy can handle that in terms of workers and et cetera. We could do that, but it's not what I would recommend. If we get $50 million, and again, let me also put another place marker. Because I've got 27 employees, we probably can do. I'm guessing, and I'm really sticking my neck out because I'm presuming the weather's going to be good. I'm presuming that nobody's going to get sick, but we could do anywhere between 30 to 50 miles a year, and that's really pushing it. If George were here, he's saying George is the maintenance superintendent. Or Ken, I don't know if he's here.
Director, do you intend, or does the department intend to seek the $2 million increase in our budget for the purpose of asphalt or materials as consistent with previous proposals?
I'm sorry, what's the
previous proposals? The department seeks $2 million for the purpose of asphalt and material supplies. Are you intending to seek that in your budget? Upcoming budget? I don't have. We haven't gotten the ceiling, so we have to. Yes, I am going to propose that. It was something that was recommended to me by the governor in the first place. So yes. Okay, I was bringing that up, Speaker, because I want to.
But this is a bigger.
I understand. So we talked about set asides, knowing that we can do a surge into road repairs and what's needed. But again, the set aside as we spoke about for the ongoing maintenance. I mean, I want to ensure that that's always on the table, because that's not something we're going to wait for even 15 years from now. That if you had that available. Maybe we won't be talking maybe at this level, having that set aside previously.
Yes. What you're saying is what I was proposing initially was not just the capital improvement, which allows us to address a lot of roads at one point in time, is something that's, because we need it. We haven't been doing it. But so that we don't get to this place again, we need to have a sustainable process that allows us to continue on way before I'm gone, and who knows what happens after 2 years or 3 years or so.
Right.
But we need to be able to sustain that, and that's what I would like to see in play.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe for the listening audience and some of the colleagues, if you'd distinguish between primary roads, secondary, tertiary,
Okay.
so that they understand what you're talking about, and what can be or is funded by the feds, and what could be better funded by this or the repair work that the good senator is suggesting.
Absolutely. So primary or routed roads are the roads that have routes, Route 1, Route 10, 7, Route 11, etc. Those are the roads that we've designated as routed roads, and they're in our maps they show as routed roads. Those are the roads that the federal highway, which we get $15.5 million a year, say that we can use for Guam's roadway system. They'll only do routed roads, and they're basically what we call our primary roads. It gets us throughout most of the island. Secondary roads are roads that come off the routed roads, and they're like Roy T. Damien, which is in Mongmong Toto. It's not a maybe it is a routed road. Sorry, yeah. So it'll come off of Roy T. Damien, and then the tertiary roads are the roads that are maybe it goes to my brain's not. Yeah. Okay. Come off of Fahrenholt, and you go into the inner streets of into Muning. That would be a secondary road. Then if you go to branches off of that into what do you call it? Cul-de-sac. That's your tertiary roads. So it goes smaller and smaller and smaller. Secondary and tertiary roads are not funded by federal highways. And let me also, if I can, give also a briefing on what they will pay and what they won't pay for. We're having struggles with Route 14, EPAL right now, and also Hamburger Highway. And the reason why we're having struggles actually paying for construction for those roadways is that we don't own the property. Now, the federal highway requires that the government of Guam either owns the roadways, with the rights of way, or has a permanent easement with another government agency. Will not go into a permanent easement with a private person. It's got to be a government entity, or we own it, and then they'll allow us to use their funds into our roadways.
Director, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, that's what I was going to ask. We've talked previously after our site visit to Malolo, and these are issues that I think we're well aware of or we've identified. And I want to bring the point up of the current bill and ask, what this is inclusive of paying on. I think you did touch into it, and I think for the general public here to understand what we talk about when we talk about subsurface. So if we look at like a $2 million maintenance fee, that'll primarily cover the resurfacing.
Yes.
But does it address long-term issues with the subsurface?
Yes, because we will do the subsurface,
Yeah.
and then we seal it with the asphalt. And that's
Okay.
what we use the $2 million for. And then $2 million would get us four miles of roadway.
So if we look at the example of Malolo right now, that would be kind of a bigger project, right? Because we talked about digging it out, having to put retaining walls and tying it in there. And, which a project like that would take a good chunk for that small section, would take a good chunk of the $2 million we would look to appropriate a year. And I guess what I'm asking is there a way, and have we identified fully what sections of road do we have on Guam that require more extensive repairs? Because looking at a capital improvement project, I look at it and approach it that either one, we make money off of it, or two, there are savings realized because we make the investment to fix it prior to paying more on the back end. And so when I look at these roads, I'd like, as we move forward with any initiative, that we identify these sections of road and know that if we're going to invest a good amount of money to resurface it and do some minor repairs, that we're going to just have to go back and revisit a year from now. And I'd like to avoid that if possible.
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't.
Yes.
Given the authority, I would like not to come
Yeah.
back to that same road project for another 15 years.
So with this 50 million, does this also address such as rights of way issues where we're going to have to enact eminent domain and start to get that because we want to add it kind of to the inventory in which we can use federal highway funds to keep and maintain it? For example, the routes going down south, we run into kind of those right of way issues. And so until we address those and finally call it good and get it under our inventory, no matter how much work we do down there, we're going to keep running into those problems because they will always be strictly limited to a limited or restricted to a limited pool of resources, regardless of how much traffic goes down there and how important and vital the highway is based on federal requirements.
And that's a fair question. So to answer that, the numbers, first of all, that I've given you are just repair numbers. They do not include purchase of property. And what we use, let me use a good example would be EPAL Road. EPAL Road, we are currently looking to wrap that up within, hopefully by this summer, for rights of way. We've already got the design, it's 100% done, and that's a $14 million project, okay? But for the routed roads, federal highways will purchase the property so that it becomes ours. We can use the federal, we can use the $15.5 million we get annually to purchase property, and we have.
With respect, then, I guess my question is then what so far has been the delay with regards to the purchase of property on Route 4 with the only road that runs to the dump? Why do we still have right-of-way issues down there up to now?
Because we have not come to that yet.
Okay.
Again, 15.5 million as opposed to, we're looking at 5 million for a $50 million bond. It seems like it's a lot, but it's really not a lot of money. Again, my overall infrastructure roadway systems, I'm saying if you want a robust maintenance where people are, if a guardrail gets taken out or a road that needs to be repaired, you want a robust system that we're actually remilling every 5 years or so. That's 30 million.
Mr. Speaker, now with this 50 million, was that something you'd be opposed to if portions of that would be to address rights of way issue as kind of the overall CIP intent of Guam's roadways?
I just my recommendation, sir, is that if the federal highway is going to pay for it, let's let them pay for it. And I know you want to push this up to the front. So if you want me to talk about ISSUANCE, I can talk about it.
Well, is that 15.5 or the appropriation from the federal government, is that specifically broken up and earmarked? Like there's a portion specifically for right-of-way purchases, or is it just one pool?
Correct.
So when I speak about us making the investment, even though they're willing to pay for it, the pool of money doesn't change. But what it does give us access to is kind of more freedom, I guess, independence to decide and prioritize based on the federal funds and how we use it, of where it can go, and not be restricted to having to take this large portion out of the annual federal grant that we get for highways and not really being able to apply it. Do you kind of understand where what I'm alluding to?
You're wanting to have control over what we want to spend
Yes.
on that project for, and the reality is, Senator, we do have that authority. Okay, let me take another 3 steps back. The Federal Highway Administration will not use their money to fund just anything. We have to come up with a 20-year plan or a 30-year master plan. So we have that. It's a 2030 master plan that's already in the books, and we're implementing that. Every 4 or 5 years, we have it's our implementation plan. This is what we're going to do for the next 4 or 5 years. We actually just closed that last year. Again, we're looking at $14.5 million a year.
Okay.
How much can we leverage, and what are we looking at? What are the high priorities? We had a lot of accidents on EPAL Road, so EPAL Road was an issue. We have a lot of transportation issues with traffic flow up in Dededo and Gigos coming from the central part of the island. So we figured that Hamburger Highway is important to us. And then we're also trying to finish the Teton Parkway. Those are basically the three areas that we're willing to set aside $3-4 million out of that $15 million to go into a Garvey bond to fund the construction of those major highways. All of that is in our what we call the Guam Transportation Implementation Plan, GTIP. If we want to make a change, say the body wants to, you want to do the ISSUANCE or you want to do another roadway, we can go back and make an amendment to our GTIP. It's a public hearing. It's a process. It gets everybody involved. Once we do that, we go through that process, and it's not short. Probably 6 months or 7 months, 8 months, something like that. And then we now have that, and we can now have the authority to use federal funds to do that project that we want to do.
All right, and just to end with this, and with respect, and again, taking your advice, and I appreciate your knowledge in this. I would want to look into that process because for me, both as a citizen and somebody from the South, I think not having that portion of Route 4 as a priority, considering the entirety of Guam's solid waste goes through that road daily, I think is a priority for us all. So I just wanted to leave with that, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, this bill here, this proposed bill, is to borrow for capital improvement projects, right? And so you did mention maintenance and patch-up work along the way, and that costs a lot of money as well. And so you also mentioned that you had a 2030 capital improvement master plan.
Yes.
Is that correct? I'm thinking that you're very well versed on that, right? So if I could just ask a question, do you have a focus on addressing the expansion of roads, especially for the areas in the south and other areas up north?
Yes, and so the master plan has identified the Route 4, but that's, I think, 2040? It's down the road.
It's down the road.
2030, 2040, something.
The reason.
2030.
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking, right, is because of climate change, the sea levels are rising, and so when we drive down south, we see all of even during typhoons, we see all the water washing up, onto the roads and also to the homes and affecting lives there. So, was there a reason why it was pushed so far back?
Oh, I'm sorry, way before my time, and I don't know.
Okay.
But I can tell you it wasn't haphazard. Roadways were considered, and we have an evaluation system, just like we did with the village master plan. It was based on safety. It was based on volume. It was based on population. It was based on all sorts of things. That's how they prioritize every street within each village.
When was this master plan put in place? What year?
The
2030 year
master plan. Gosh, it was a 2010. I think it was 2009, 2010.
2008. Okay, thank you.
Maybe the oversight chair of Public Works can bring you in to do the master plan, GTIP, and that process. I don't want to encroach on that. Also, what more specifically is this? The 700 and 800 million that was originally for the village. How much of that has been addressed over the last 5 years, if any, and how were those selected? I know you gave us a brand new listing now, and maybe you might address what this is.
Right. So, I'm sorry. You want me to explain
Well,
this?
a combination of both. There was that 748 million from 2008 to.
So the 2010 village master plan was all of the secondary and tertiary within 840 some odd miles. What this is that I went to the mayor's council last December, and actually went there 2 years before that, and asked them for the same, what are your top 3 priorities? And once they gave that to me, this this listing, I think we have five mayors that we're still waiting for the response, but we kept the listing, the roads that were from the prior listing. Anyways, the amount is about $16 million just to do this. And what I was asking a year ago was, give me $2 million, let's chip away at this, keep chipping away at this, until we can get at least the top three priorities of each of the village mayor's roadways taken care of. And hopefully we do a better job and we might get us a little bit more. But that's what I was doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, a couple of things. One is, well, first of all, Mr. Just to be correct, I know we were going off base because we were talking about this bill specific, and this bill specific addressed $1 million worth of bond borrowing for secondary and tertiary roads. I know we got on to the routed highway, which is really a separate issue. So I just want to bring the focus back in on this bill and what it purports to do. Because, yeah, the federal funding is another thing. We can talk about that because you did raise the issue of garbage bond borrowing. That idea has been around for a while, and yet I don't think we've gone down that road, right? That's basically leveraging the federal highway money to give to the bond market, and the $50 million basically would be used as payment for garbage bonds. In general, that's kind of the concept, right? Well, no, I'm just saying, you're saying we received $15 million approximately.
15, yes.
Right.
Yes.
$15 million, and that would be the repayment basis for a Garvey bond.
Yes.
But that's not really the issue before us today. The issue on this bill is really the $50 million bond borrowing for secondary and tertiary roads. Correct.
Yes.
Right. I mean that's really what we're here for, the round table.
Yes.
Right. One of the things I did look at on this, and you just clarified it, this list actually came from the mayors, right?
Yes.
Their top three roads.
All except for 5.
Oh, except for 5.
Yes.
I guess the question I have for you is, have you or has your department gone out to check these roads, whether they really do need the kind of repair, and should they be the priority within that village? Because, I mean, some roads might have more traffic that aren't on here and probably need more repair. And I say that because, and before you answer, Glenn, I say that because we have gone ahead and checked some of these roads on the map and actually have eyeballed it. It's like, well, I'm not sure that's really the problem. So is there kind of a criteria that you give the mayors on what they really should be looking at in terms of which roads should be repaired? I mean, highest traffic use, whatnot and whatnot.
So in answer to your question, Senator, no.
Okay.
In answer to your other question, do we have a criteria to evaluate? Yes.
Okay.
And that's what we did for the Village Street Master Plan.
Okay. I think Mayor Rudy would like to chip in on this one.
Senator, I have a lot of respect for you, but I don't think you have any respect for us mayors. We know what we're doing.
I understand, Mayor. This is not any kind of a personal attack.
No, I'm not.
Right.
This is not
And so-
personal.
I'm not
talking
talking
about me being the mayor. So you're trying to tell me that you're going to choose which roads I need fixing in my village?
No, sir. I asked DPW.
In so many ways, that's what you're saying?
No, sir. That is
Senator?
mistaken, and please understand. I asked DPW whether after the mayors submit their proposed roads that need to be fixed, whether, first of all, they had inspected those roads to see,
Why,
first of all.
Senator, with
well,
all due respect,
because
why do you have to inspect it when
bec-
we are the people that ride those roads and suffer in those roads? Why are you questioning the director about our decisions?
because it's a matter of prioritizing a limited
I
amount
know
of money.
what to prioritize, Senator.
Understand, Mayor, and this is not a personal attack. It
No,
really
this is-
isn't.
I
This is
understand that.
this is a
let's
question.
rub
Well,
shoulders so we
the
can
question was
get
to the
point.
department director of whether there was a criteria and whether they have actually gone out to inspect the roads. Because could the money be used elsewhere? And I'll tell you this, Mayor, just to let you know, being from Tamuning, I did take a look at the roads that were mentioned on this, right? I do understand where they are. I'm not sure they're the highest priority, but there it is, right? And I'm just asking. We also took a look at another village in Dededo, right? Knowing full well that there are many areas in Dededo. It's the most populated village on this island, and a lot of the residents up there have also chimed in on us on their roads being repaired. Taking a look at some of these lists, again, it's just a matter of what is the highest priority, what is the highest density, in which the best use can be made. It's not a direct attack on any judgment by the mayor. It's basically a matter of prioritizing by the DPW to make sure that if they only have X amount of dollars, that's what they do. And the only reason why I ask that, because now we're talking about a $50 million bond borrowing. In this list alone, it only lists $14 million. So the expansion of the ability of the DPW to be able to go into secondary and tertiary roads actually improves your chances to address a lot more projects. That's the issue. It's not an attack on your judgment.
That's not what I'm talking about here.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, Mr. Mayor.
Well,
And that's what this conversation is about, the $50 million bond borrowing. That's what this is about. Please don't get offended, Mr. Mayor, because that's not exactly what I was addressing.
Sir,
I was
I'm not
addressing the
okay?
logistical issues concerning $50 million. If on this list it has 14, I've seen another list that lists $15 million. This bill proposes $50 million, right? My next follow-up question, if you probably would have just sat through it, was, are there any other secondary roads that they may have identified to assist you in repairing the more roads within your village? Because $15 million versus $50 million on this bill is a big difference. It's a $35 million difference. What else can be? That was where I was going with this, Mayor. This was not an attack on your integrity or your decision on what your roads were.
Sir, if you look at those lists, okay, all they're asking us is 3 roads that we think is the most important. There's 5 here. There's 5 here. So if the 3 and the 19 villages that we're addressing, if whatever you said, $15 million, the other 2 from 19 villages will probably add to $45 million.
Mr. Mayor, if you just let me finish where I was going with all this before getting all offended about where I was going with this, I think we could have reached something up. But that, Mr. Chairman, like I said, I don't want to have this round table denigrate into something that it shouldn't be. And I'll end my question. But with all due respect, Mr. Mayor, I apologize to all the mayors if they feel offended by this. But really, there were just logistical issues that I wanted to clarify in my mind of how we can be able to go down this road. And again, knowing and having done some research, maybe not in your village, but upon some other villages, and taking a look at which roads we're talking about, we were able to Google map it, we were actually able to get a picture of that road. Some of those roads look pretty decent. And that's why the question had to at least be asked. That's all we're doing here. This is that forum that we get to ask any question we want to.
Hey, this is a roundtable discussion, and we're discussing.
Well, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, we're discussing. And this is healthy. So we can find out actually which is the most important roads to spend our important dollars on.
Mr. Mayor, I apologize.
And I apologize
And again,
to
I
you,
don't
sir,
want
but
to
I just
miss.
want-
Okay, I think
Mr. Chairman, if I
thank
may
you.
continue at least one more question towards Gita on this one issue.
Chiquita, go ahead.
On Jay Rojas, and this question basically is that if we go down this road on $1 million bond borrowing, would this count against the borrowing cap?
Yes, sir, it would.
And right now, where do we stand in terms of that borrowing cap?
244 million.
We have 244 million?
Correct.
So this will bring it down to 190 some.
194.
And top of your head, or maybe even with knowledge that you do have, can we anticipate that there will be more bond borrowing past this one that would count against the borrowing cap?
I can't speak to that at this point right now. Nothing's actually been, what we use as far as the after
Would a Garvey bond count against the debt ceiling?
no.
It would not,
No.
because there's a dedicated funding source
Right.
from the federal government.
Right.
Okay.
What counts towards against the debt ceiling is actually anything that would be putting the general fund at risk.
Okay. Good enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In July.
Thank you. Mr. Longuerre, yes, I just want to make it, maybe if you could just rephrase it a little bit, or, yeah, in general. Okay, so my understanding is that if you do it in-house, you repair these roads, it would cost us 1/3 of contracting it out versus if we contracted it out. But if we have, and so this list is only the top 3 priorities for the mayors, and amounts to $20 million.
16.
I mean, 16. I was rounding it off. Okay, so
Yeah,
$16
20.
million, right? And but is the mayor correct? If we added on their top 5, we would easily get to the $50 million.
We'd have to, in answer to Senator Espaldon, we did actually go to the roads, and that's how we came up with the cost estimate. So,
Right.
So we did do that as far as prioritizing, and if you wanted to do incorporate the village master plan, which has an evaluation system. Just a suggestion is we have their top 3, and the next 2, if you'd like to go over the top 5, we just pull off from the 2010, because those roads we haven't done any road
Cost
we haven't done any repairs. There's a couple of roads that we have done repair work, and that was after Auditor Doris Brooks had mentioned, when we paid off the bond, we had an extra amount of money, and I think Senator Rodriguez at the time instituted a flood mitigation law or bill, and that was the bill that allowed me to, said these are the roads we want to fix, and this is how much money you have to fix, and this is flood areas that we wanted you to take care of, and so we did that, and so with that we were able to do Lamasu. We did a couple other roads, and then there was a balance of about a few $100,000, and that allowed me to do the remainder of Mechechi and Balaku. So that was from that funding source.
So their top 5 list might need some adjustment because you
I
might
don't
have
think
done
so.
some because of the funding.
Yeah.
Or well, anyways,
yeah.
they'll still come up with a top 5 list, I'm sure.
Sure.
But do you agree that it would equal 50 million or over?
I don't know.
Okay.
We'd have to go and
All right. Well,
There's
what
almost
about?
$800 million that needs to be
I know.
done. This is
He said
just
overall,
the,
but we're talking only the top 3 or top 5 of the mayor's priorities, right?
So if we do the top 3 that the mayor's proposed, and we looked at the evaluation system, like you were mentioning, we can get the next 2 roads and that are
Okay.
priority from what we've looked at.
But when you say that if you do it in-house, it's more cost-effective, but you're only able to do 30 to 50 miles per year with the number of employees that you have right now?
I looked at George, and he's getting older by the time every time I look at him.
That's too much.
I think, what are we saying, George, for a year? 20? 20? Okay, sorry. 20 years. 20 miles of roadway a year.
Okay, is there any way?
Given the current staffing that we
Right.
have.
So I guess I want to know, what is your current plan without either of these, without the bond, without the $2 million extra a year? What is your current plan for roads? Is there any?
Well, this year, even though I got $12 million from the Territorial Highway Fund, I've got to pay for bus drivers. I've got to pay for 75% of my budget is personnel. Okay, so I've got bus drivers, which is the biggest component of my budget, and then I've got highways, which is the next biggest component. If you take, as far as this is concerned, and so buses includes not just my drivers, but also the transportation maintenance people, the people that repair the buses. So they take a majority of my budget. What I have is about $5 million of the Territorial Highway Fund goes to highways, and of that, again, 3/4 of that goes to personnel, and another 1.2 is what I have to do maintenance work with.
Okay.
I pulled $500,000 of that this year, and Liz is not happy with that because that's what we use to fix the guardrails that need to be fixed, the potholes and the roadways and the storm drains that we need to take care of. And I pulled it from them so we can do Hamburger because it was needed.
Oh. Okay, so that's what I wanted to ask. So none of these roads is being addressed with that 1.2. The Hamburger Road is going to be addressed with that 1.2 million that you have.
It's not normally addressed.
Yeah. Okay.
But I forced it on this year. Yes.
All right, and then But have you tried to come up with a plan that if you got the money in-house, could you find a way to do all the projects? For like hire more people,
Yes.
things like that?
So if you're asking for a strategic, long-term plan, I can only give you...
No, we want a short-term plan. I think the mayors are very impatient. I don't blame them. All the drivers
Sure.
are impatient. So, yeah, I think we're going to end up paying a lot of money if we get a $50 million bond to contract it out. And I'm just asking, is there a way to do it cheaper, but maintain the speed that we're looking at with the bond?
My planning horizons were 5 years for the $50 million.
5 years for the $50 million.
Yes. But if I double my staff, and I'm not just throwing numbers out, it's actually numbers that we really did need, and we've actually discussed and we shared that. We've been trying to pull and say, can we get 50 road, just strictly road workers, not accounting people, not anybody else, but road workers, and so we can address this. And so if I'm saying 20 miles, then I'm looking at 40 miles or 50 miles a year if you're allowing me to double that.
Is that something that you think your department could manage right now?
I think we've been cut to the bone, and I think that if you're really looking at what our core responsibilities are, I think we're okay with the bus drivers. I mean, we may need a few more. My correct numbering would be, I know I'm going off the subject, speaker, forgive me, is about 130 bus drivers, and then you won't hear any complaints from the parents to bus 25,000 or 30,000 school children a day. But my next core is the highways. And that's why I'm focusing on that. And I think if we get 50 highway maintenance workers that can bulldoze and all that, you'll see a tremendous difference. Plus, if we're able to seal, and like I said, we do road work and we don't get back to it for another 10, 15 years.
You said you aren't able to seal it. Could you just explain that? Why not?
Because we don't have the ability to put asphalt on.
Why not?
If we don't have the asphalt machines, and it's not something we would want to buy because you need an asphalt plant, and that business, even if I do subsurface work, it's prepared. We put cascal, we rolled it, we got all the swells so that it properly drains, et cetera, et cetera. If it's too small of an area for somebody like Hawaiian Rock or NEPO to turn on their batch plants, it's all economics.
Okay.
If it's too small, they won't turn it on, and we have to wait for them. And if it rains, then we're going to have to redo the work. So it's not stuff that we want to do. It's not stuff that we want to get into.
So something you have to contract out,
Sure.
pretty much.
Sure.
And
to me,
you could plan that, I would
Yes,
hope,
yes,
so
yes.
that you can
And-
get them to batch it out.
yes, and we've done that.
Yeah.
We've done that with Lamasu.
Okay.
We've done that with.
Well, I guess so. Yeah, I would like to see if you have an alternative to, because even if we got a $50 million bond and we contracted that all out, we still end up with roads not done if we're paying 3 times the amount. And I just want to see if you could. I mean, I know you had a discussion for $2 million a year. I think even that would take too long, right? I would
And I
like to
agree.
see this $16 million worth done like immediately. These are the top 3 priorities.
What
And
would your time
that-
horizons be?
me? Well,
Yes. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
I'm not sure how long it actually takes to do like one road. How long would it take to do a road? One road. Let's
For-
say,
Depends on how long.
I mean, some of these are huge compared to the others, yeah. But just an estimate. 6 months?
It took us for a half-mile road, just for reference, for Lamasu. It was a half-mile road. It took us a month and a half, right? 6 weeks? 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's from
So,
nothing.
Yeah, so let's just say, come up with a plan where, how could we get these the top 3 items on this list done in a matter of a year or 2 years? I mean, is that possible, or am
Yes,
I
but
dreaming?
You're not talking 50 people now.
No?
You're talking about 75 to maybe 100. That's not something that, to me, is...
Because it's
right
only
now, we
$16
wanna
million.
be-
Yeah.
Yes, I know. but
Okay. All right. So, but this cost estimate, is this contracted out estimate, or this is in-house estimate?
It's in-house.
Okay. So if we contract it out, we're not even looking at
No.
that much.
No. I'll convert the length into miles, and then we'll give you what it'll cost you in-house and cost you contracted out. I can do that.
Yeah, okay, and when you do that, can you also tell us whether or not that 500,000 is just material or material and personnel?
For the 500,000 that for Hamburger Highway, that's just material and the ceiling. I'm counting my workers' cost is sunk.
Okay.
The original plan was the top 5. Original plan? Because you said the 2009 was top 5, then you narrowed down to 3.
No, it was top. I was always top 3. I've only asked the mayors for the top 3 roads.
But you also have another template that talks about top 5, or you can add 2
I
that
think
the
you're-
mayor's already put in.
Yeah, there's some mayors that put in more than 3.
Okay.
But yes.
Well, the bill right now is kind of it's open-ended, and we've been talking about the top 3, and wanted to be very specific of what we will be borrowing for, and I think it would be prudent that if we update this, if it's top 5, because right now we're talking about $60 million and we're going out for 50. That's why I was asking earlier if this is, you're correct, yes, this is if it was done in-house, and we were looking at $50 million, because if it's being done in-house, all you're doing is purchasing the asphalt and the material supplies.
Yes.
So that's what I brought up earlier, is $50 million going to be used for asphalt, materials, and supplies, because we can do the entire island if it was just asphalt, material, and supplies. But I'm not sure how long it will take, because we're talking $50 million based on the numbers you're giving per half mile. We can do 100+ miles with $50 million in-house. So maybe what we...
But more personnel.
Right.
Just want to
Right.
qualify
Well, I'm just saying,
that.
no, maybe not more personnel, but maybe it would take longer.
Okay, and yeah, okay, take longer. yes.
But my point, Mr. Director, is
So I'm still thinking 1 to 2 years that
yes,
Senator Talahi was mentioning.
right. No, and I agree, and I just want to make sure if we're going to attach anything to this bill and what we're borrowing, is that we have an updated plan, and that maybe justifies the $50 million, so that unless you're going to make an assessment on top 3 and you're going to realize that actually it's going to cost more just for the top 3, because this is just, you just updated it now. Oh yeah.
It's not going to cost more than this 16 million, but this I'm asking is if we, and I'd have to go back to the mayors and dodge their tomatoes, because it's not going to be in a year or 2. It's going to take 2 or 3 years for me to do this.
Because if for $50 million and we have a $756 million, if we're to do the whole thing plan, I think we will have to be very specific of what we're going to use the $50 million for, and we have to decide if this is for the Village Streets Master Plan top 3, so that we all know, at least our people know, that we're borrowing for the top 3 roads. Because when you look at $50 million and you have $60 million is all we need, I think maybe there has to be some adjustments if we're going to go top 5 to maximize the use of these monies. So
This $2 million figure keeps coming up. That's what you basically need to be able to use your in-house assets, right?
No, Senator, that it would be, all I wanted to do was have a starter, if you will. I wanted to plant a seed.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying $30 million is what we need to be shooting for.
Yeah.
I'm saying that we grow from 2 to what we feel, as you as policymakers and me as an operator, once we fix the roads so that we're comfortable with it, then you have other higher priorities and that's not for me to decide. I
Understand.
just want to grow that, and because right now I think the roads are in horrendous state.
So here's where I'm getting at. If we're going to go after this $50 million bond, we're going to need to find $5 million in revenues annually to be able to service that debt, right? Or, as you're saying, given the assets and the personnel you have, with $2 million a year, you can slowly chip away at these repairs, right? And so I just want to ask, I guess my question goes to the Director of Rev and Tax. Because it seems like we're still kind of ignoring the fact that there's this 800-pound gorilla in the room as to where we're going to get this money to service this debt. And, we're not sure we want to touch the fuel tax to increase that, or at least everybody looked the other way when that got raised. But when I asked the Director of Rev and Tax, how much tax revenue is Guam foregoing by we have a law in the books that exempts the fuel tax on that fuel that gets transshipped through Guam. It gets offloaded on the ship, gets stored in one of the barrels, and then it gets loaded back on another ship and gets taken out to the other islands. And I know that I believe about 6 years ago when I looked into that, there was like about $2 million of revenue in there. Do you know what that revenue is? There is that
Yes.
tax exemption, correct?
Yes, those are fuels that actually come in, then they're transported out to other Micronesian islands.
Correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
And-
correct.
And I know that about 6 years ago, maybe there was about $2 million there of tax revenues. And when that idea got raised, it went over like a lead balloon. But we're all looking for money. Where do we find the money, right? So I would just like, Mr. Chairman, that maybe Rev and Tax can go back and revisit how much tax revenues is being lost from that tax exemption on transshipped fuel.
Thank you. Mr. Longuerro, just a couple more questions. One is, how long do you think it would take you to use the $50 million bond proceeds on roads, to finish the roads?
Again, my planning horizon was probably 5 years, but again, it all depends on which projects you want to fund, and
Is that 5 years in-house or 5 years contracted out?
I was looking at both
Okay.
because
Could you give us proposals of both ways? Yeah, in-house, how fast could you could you do it? And
sure.
how fast could you do it if we contracted it all out? And then how many projects would that really be?
Well, doing
looking
the
at? Yeah.
math right off the top of our heads
Oh,
here
no,
without
later. I mean,
Okay.
yeah. And then if my understanding of this bill. Progress could we see in a year? $3.5 million.
So 3.5 divided into 16 a year.
Do you have that capacity? Yeah. Can you get these done?
For 3.5, yes, I do have the capacity, and without more people, I can do that with 3.5.
You can get these 16 million.
It'll take me.
Project.
it's 10 million would keep your crew working year round on roads, and then based on that, kind of looking at the number here. So, I mean, you said this right here at 16 would take you 3 years, so you estimate maybe like 2 and some change, or is 3 conservative or hard number on the estimates for these in terms of time? And we're just trying to find a correlation between the amount we spend and the miles.
I think we can do, if you do give me the $3 million a year, I can spend it. And I can spend it with
Yeah,
my
I'm sure.
my staff and build roads and make you proud of that.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to find, at least for long-term projection, right? If I were able to identify a funding source with some things I'm working on right now and earmark it, and you say 10 million would keep you working on roadways year-round with the staff you have.
Yes. Yes.
And that's kind of the magic number we can hopefully try to shoot for.
Yes. That's a good planning number.
So 10 million, and primarily, and to Senator Morrison's point, that 10 million that primarily is just for asphalt and supplies, correct? All right, and that would kind of
Storm
steam
drains, yes.
and storm drains, and that would kind of advance this agenda, and we could look at something in a good chunk of this being knocked out in about a year from the time you were given appropriated the money.
Yeah, if you're looking at from the 16 million at 3.5, and you're we're looking at 6 miles of roadway. If that is a chunk way, if that's a chunk to you, then yes, the answer is yes. And I'm just trying to manage what your expectations are.
No. I mean,
I'm just telling you what we can do.
And that's what I'm just trying to see is what your capabilities would look
Right.
like if fully funded, right? How to make the most efficient use of every single one of your roadmen's time throughout the entire year that they're constantly working on roads, I think. And so I just was curious about that number, and it's 10 million. Okay.
Yes.
Let me get the mayors first. Any other mayors want to comment? Yeah, well,
I think I could give them half.
I just wanted to know if any of the mayors wanted to comment besides what was here. Okay. If not, do you have a question? Do you have a question for Reverend Tax? No? Okay.
I was very disappointed not to see Guam Regional Mass Transit sitting here at the table, because when we're looking at the problem that we're facing here on Guam, the approach that you guys are talking about here is like standing there trying to plug your fingers into holes that are developing in a dike. In long term, it's not going to succeed. What we need to be doing is looking at taking cars off the roads, because last year when I looked at the number of vehicles, we had over 206,000 cars on Guam. That number is going up. That number of vehicles is going to put a lot of wear and tear on the roads. And so one of the goals of this body should be to find ways to reduce that, which would be to strengthen our mass transit system to where we have something like Honolulu. In order to do that, at the village level, we have to improve roads. So I was hoping priority to roads that would serve mass transit functions. Because in Santa Rita, I know one of the roads that Dale is going to be putting on his list, and I can guarantee you a bus will never drive down that road. Whereas if focus and effort had been put on improving the roads to support mass transit, to make the ride smoother, because I don't know, how many of you at this table have ridden a bus? Just out of curiosity. Okay, pretty good. For those of you who haven't, riding the buses is horrible. And it's especially horrible when you get into the villages because of the potholes and the illegal speed bumps that have been put in place. If we're ever going to get more people to consider riding mass transit, we have to work from the ground up, literally, because before we go out and spend millions of dollars on rolling stock, we have to improve the roads they're going to be rolling over so that we don't shorten the lifespan of these vehicles or dramatically increase the maintenance cost on these vehicles. So this bill is timely because we're looking at improving roads in the villages. If we gave priority to the roads that mass transit would be using, we would be accomplishing 2 goals instead of 1. And then as we improve the roads that mass transit would be using, we could see, if we ever get our arms wrapped around building a real mass transit system, we could see a significant portion of our population shift from driving cars to work to using mass transit to work. I use myself as an example. In Honolulu, where I lived for 12 years, I put between 2,000 and 3,000 miles a year on my car. Here on Guam, I put 1,000 miles a month on my car. So if we had a Honolulu-style quality level mass transit system, I'm sure a substantial portion of the population would shift some or all of their work commuting over to mass transit, which would save them a lot of money, reduce the wear and tear on the roads on Guam, which would give Glenn here a fighting chance to catch up on the deterioration on our main travel routes. So that's why I just wanted to say that I like the intent of this bill. I think it's badly needed, a capital improvement project that's overdue. I just ask that we include something in there so that we line it up with other projects that it could support to help reduce transportation problems here on the island. That's all.
Thank you. Anybody else want to contribute to this discussion? No, I'm not looking for mayor, it's just a comment. Did you want to comment, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. So far, I think he had a general question, like, is there going to be more borrowing? Senator Spalding? Yes, there will be more borrowing now, in the future, and forever, unless we find a way that we can pay as we go. How many cars are there on this island? Increase the driver's license fee, the vehicle registration, and put some of those cameras that when you break a yellow light, snaps a picture and you will get a bill. And if you don't pay that bill, impound that car. It will reduce the traffic, maybe safer roads, and you'll get some money. The other way is, well, there's a lot of waste. The biggest burden to the roads are the big trucks. The big trucks, and I'm not trying the big trucks, the really big trucks, heavy burden on the roads, real heavy, not only on the roads, but on the trash. And if we can control the companies that brings in these trash, like perhaps all the wholesale people, the ones that bring in big masses of, the mats, and there's a lot of warehouse. All these companies are big trash haulers. Why don't we increase the fees on the big trucks? Maybe even buses. Buses, tourists, of course. But we have to be able to generate money as we go. We can't just borrow me fund night. We have to kind of pay as we go. What is wrong with paying as we go? Have a means of collecting something from those who use the facilities you have. That costs money. There's a lot of trash. And they're big companies. They bring in a lot of trash. Big trucks. Heavy duty on the roads. Okay, I guess borrowing is more than an option. It's a fact. It already has a number.
Thank you very much.
No, please listen to me. I'm not
Okay,
trying
no.
to be facetious. I'm trying to see that there are a lot of places that you can save, but you can make money. Not just borrow me, or we have to cover this somehow. Well, put some cameras that every time somebody's vehicle breaks the yellow light, safety for the people, and get some money out of it.
That has been considered and is being considered.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. Then if you've heard it all, then
Well, no,
submit.
I'm just
That's all right.
trying to, there was a bill that was already introduced to that, and they've been
And is
discussing
it
it.
producing any results?
No.
I haven't
it
seen
was
any
not.
cameras.
It hasn't passed.
Oh, okay.
There was some major objection to it, but there was a bill to address that very issue.
How about trying to put an extra, fee or something on the big trucks, the ones that are the heaviest duties
Yeah.
on the road?
Senor, actually, we're the government as a whole is making progress towards that, and with the upgrading of the tips and scales, so that they're able to weigh. So the common practice is you weigh the vehicles and you pay by weight.
Oh, maybe
So-
increase that then.
Well, it's kind of still in the process of being implemented, but it is something that's been addressed. So, I mean, it's been a long time coming. It's unfortunate, but you're definitely on the right track, because I
Yes.
do agree the big trucks are a big problem. But we have to make sure that when we tax them, we're taxing them
Yeah.
appropriately based on the loads.
You can monitor it and monitor it and monitor it and put it in studies and put it on shelves, okay? Monitor it. Sooner or later, you have to find a solution so that you are not always in the same rut. So I'd say find some sort of funding source. Increase the tax on gas. Those who import, maybe if they had to pay for the higher import of all these people that are bringing in, trash from, not trash, but eventually they beat up. Maybe if they had to screen what they buy because they're paying more at the ports for all the things they bring in, maybe they'll do a little bit more screening, a little bit less buying, maybe stricter observance of, do you really need it? And if it is contributing to the road traffic and the landfill, charge them. Charge not just these vehicles, because they will spread it out to the people, but we all use it. But we can't always depend on borrowing. I mean, at some point we have to be self-sufficient. At least try. It is a worthy thing, but you could try. So look at this trash. What costs the government more money? Trash and roads. Education is right up there too, but I'm not touching that one. This one, trash. Heavy duty on the road. Major contribution to pollution. Major contribution to landfill. And it isn't cheap. Hey, that landfill is, you have to escort the trucks going through certain places, and then escort them and close the roads off, and then when you get to the other side, proceed on to Malolo. That's not cheap. So that's waste. The other thing I see as waste, maybe you'll have to review the efficacy of your agencies. I think it's about time to review GIDA. Of all the 25 years they get tax rebate. I'm not pointing out to Dusit Tani, okay? But that's the only one. But no,
that's completely out. We can have a completely separate discussion on that one.
Okay.
We're just trying to deal with this bill.
I
Okay?
quit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You've done it.
Anybody else? Otherwise, I'm going to expect that you're going to provide me with some language. You'll provide me some cost estimates. The mayors have provided some list. Angel, you had? Okay, please.
I know that we've been talking about roads. This list that you see in front of you, that some of you have, the top three, actually this is a list that was prepared by the villagers prior to even any proposal for borrowing. came about because we had met with the director over a month ago, and had asked us to come up with the top 3 in each village because he was doing this $2 million set aside where he was trying to be able to figure out how he can help the villages. The the appropriation that we get from the legislature, there's one appropriation that the only way we're going to distribute it to the villages is based on our road mileage inventory. And the latest one that we get from Public Works, there's about 700 miles of roads, secondary roads on Guam. 700 miles. This amount of money that you see here for the top 3 roads only covers 20 miles at the most. So there's still 680 miles of road in the villages that are not even covered by this top 3 list of inventory. So if we're going 16 million for 20 miles of road, what do you think 680 miles of road is going to cost, and in how many years? I'm going to have the problem of, when we get this, which village is going to go first, or who's going to take the most amount of money? I think what we need to do is allocate, if this borrowing, this bond does go through, is to allocate to each village a certain amount of money so that Yamatic doesn't have to worry that he's not going to get a cent because Dedido ate it all up or Jigo took it all up. In other words, there's a guaranteed amount that's going to be set aside for each village to use. The part about who's going to come first, well, I think maybe the director, instead of using in-house, is contracted out so that as many villages can get the work done at once. I mean, there's going to be a lot of companies out there that have the capability to be able to do road repairs. And are we going to incorporate in the villages the guardrails, the bike paths, the sidewalks, or are we just going to just lay gravel and put blacktop and that's it, without caring again about these amenities that are needed by our constituents? And then what happens after we fix the roads? Is GWA going to come along or some other entity going to come along, dig it all up, and then leave it up to the villagers again or the mayors to figure out a way how to fix it or patch it up? I'll give you an example. Tijan right now is being dug up from one end to the other because they're laying pipes for the jet fuel. Whose responsibility is it to make sure that those things that are dug up are going to be put in at least to the condition that they are now, where it's drivable? Or is it going to be left like that and then we're going to have potholes all over the place? And no one is going to fix it. We're going to look for the Mayor Barragata again to start fixing those roads. Maintenance equipment. Maybe this is something that we should also look at. I know that we had maintenance equipment that once upon a time we had, before the director came in, agreed to give to the village mayors in 3 regions, northern, central, and southern. Give them backhoes, give them dump trucks, and I think even a grader at one point, to be able to have 3 regions work simultaneously when it comes to maintaining flood mitigation and drainage and things like that. It didn't happen that way. The equipment is, of course, being used by Public Works, and in a good way because they are repairing roads and doing what they have to do. But the thing is, it's for the mayor that's on the project is being done, good for them. But for the other mayor that's been waiting 3-4 months, no, they still are waiting because of there's not enough to go around. So what we had proposed before was break up the island into 3 regions so that everybody has a chance of getting something done at the same time. Instead of, we had a meeting this morning and I gave them an example when we had the recycling with Bali Steel 4 years ago. We raffled out the villages as to where Bali Steel was going to go first and pick up the recycling. It started in Santa Rita and we figured, we'll be done for the whole 19 villages. We just give each village a week to do the work with Bali Steel. Well, we started with Santa Rita. 4 weeks later, we were still in Santa Rita because they had all that stuff that Bali Steel had to get out. And at that time, Mayor Lizama, who was mayor of Jigo, complained, well, by the time you get to Jigo, it's going to be 2 years and I'm going to be out of office, you know. And so the raffling and of villages for the 19, we already know does not work. Because the poor mayors on the end of the line, like they say, their term may be over and never comes for them to get the benefits of having recycling, or in this case, having the road repairs done in the villages. So I think we have to look at trying to have some equity in probably the most equal way is just to divide it up into 3 regions and have 3 regions being worked out at the same time. We proposed this to Director Younger at some point, and so to have everybody work. And like I said, I think there's enough work to go around, and there's enough businesses that are be able to carry on the work and have it done. But these are the things I just want to bring up is this 16 million is only, if we equate the footage, the linear foot of roads that we're doing to the amount of money, it's only 20 miles of road. It's $139 a foot. And we have, like I said in the inventory, we have from Public Works from 2009, 688 miles of road in secondary. And some roads are not even covered because when you Google it, there's in the villages, you know how you have some shade trees over the roads? Those don't show on the Google map, so it's not counted as a road. You know, so even if it's here and it ends up over there and this is all shade, that portion that's covered by the shade is not counted because it's by satellite, it's over, the trees are covering, so there's not a road to them. And so we've been arguing Public Works too as to the real mileage of roads in the villages. And the other thing after that is, how about the roads that need to be opened? Where Chamorro Land Trust has come and given people home or properties inside jungles that at this time they can't even make use of it because there are no roads to go to those villages. Are we going to be able to entertain those two and add it on to this? 50 million is a lot of money. I'm sure that can be all used up for the roads in the villages. But like I said, it's just we have to be careful as to how we are able to divvy it out to the villages and to make sure that everybody has the right share.
Okay, and I think the thing that's going to need to be done also is that you're going to have to get your mayors to agree not to beat up on him or us on the way that this is going to be done. Because we could build one in every village, but we'll build a half a yard in each.
Yes.
Because the cost of contracting out 19 contracts to do it publicly is going to be prohibitive. So, you know, this bill was to address trying to figure out, we knew we had 788 million. He was asking for 2 million. Somebody else was talking about some 4. You're now brought in now the Chamorro Land Trust roads that haven't been even marked. We can't even deal with the 788. And so, and you want them all done at the very same time.
Well, I didn't say all of them done at the very same time, but at least 3 portions of the island being done at the same time.
But within the district, which part's going to be first? And I'm just saying, we've got to be reasonable when we know that we have a limited amount of money and what can be done. Either if we can do it in-house and it's going to cost 500 as they claim, we just did some additional trying to get your personnel in there. It's like 900. And so it's not that cheap, and trying to figure out whether or not that's any different from having it contracted out. That's why we want to see the figures to determine whether or not it's something that can even be done, you know. So we'll have another roundtable after we've had a chance to review some of the language, but no, I mean, I'm just trying to get everybody's expectations. I mean, if we were to do $2 million a year, their terms would be over, but many of us will have been dead already, you know. And our children, even our youngest ones, may not be alive by the time that we do it at $2 million a year. So, but we're trying to do a bigger chunk and trying to make it reasonable, and if we're going to, I want, and nothing happens, nothing will happen.
No, Mr. We commend you, and we support the bill. We support the getting the money to build these roads. I'm just saying that for a mayor, being number 6 when you divide it by 3 is better than being number 19 that you, like you say, probably dead by the time the road gets fixed.
Okay.
Good question. So just to reiterate again for the panel, 10 million would keep your staff working on roads full-time. So optimally, if we can somehow appropriate or earmark 10 million a year, that would maximize the full potential of your road staff. And how many crews does that include from that amount?
That's the 26,
Is that-
27 staff that I have now.
Now, are they broken up based on equipment and equipment that they can use based on crews, or is that one crew working on one section at a time?
Yeah, ideally, Angel is correct. We would prefer, if we got up to 50, we'd divide the island into 3 regions, and we'd be able to address that.
But right now with the
But
staff
today,
you have,
yeah, we basically have two crews.
2 crews. I got it. Okay. So 2 crews, and also I'm assuming equipment is a restriction, right? So the
No.
staff you have right now.
No, we have the equipment.
So how much staff would you need optimally to support and utilize all the equipment you have available at your disposal for roads specifically? Because I guess my question is, do we have equipment out there that could be used to build roads that's kind of just sitting collecting rust because we don't have money for supplies and we don't have money and personnel to use it?
Yeah. No, we don't have equipment we have equipment that's not we're not using 100% at the time, but that doesn't.
I can understand what you're saying.
Yeah, because I'm not just doing road repairs, I'm not just doing flood repair. When there's a dead or matai, we have people that are loading up our dump trucks and taking it and spreading that out.
Well, specifically, I'm talking about the road, just the road folks and the road equipment.
Just with the road work.
Yeah.
Given this 16 million, if you give me 16 million, we'll do this in a year and a half. 2 years.
Yeah. Okay.
2 years. So 2 years, you get all of the top 3 for all the mayors, and then actually.
Yeah. So 10 million would max you. All right. That's because I'm just looking at a figure that, if somehow we were to find a way to appropriate it internally, either from savings realized via some other fund or in terms of reprioritization on the budget, then I just wanted to have a number that I can look around and see what would maximize you guys if we were to say as a government, okay, we're prioritizing the road. For me, I'm assuming based on your response, this is the optimal figure that we would give you to have you guys working at 100% capacity.
Yes.
All right, and thank you.
Director, is there plans to, I know you have new equipment, but are you looking to strengthen the fleet, or is there plans to, I'm sure over time those are going to be wearing out with the workload's going to pick up, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of wear and tear.
Yeah.
And
Typically, heavy equipment, my planning horizon's about 10 years.
so, you're not looking at this, any adjustments or any flexibility to include equipment as a...
Not with the 26. You give me 50, do we need any more equipment, George? But do we need more equipment? Okay, yes. No, I'll give you that number too.
Yes. Yeah, we need that. I know the language is specific to certain items, but I think we may have to consider equipment. If
Sure.
this...
I'll let you know what that is if you want me to gear up to 50, and I'll give you that number. But again, just to answer Senator Talahi's question, or I don't know if she was heading that way. I'm just presuming, but for me, my optimum number is 50. Gives me, as Angel said, the ability to address 3 regions.
So, 2, 30, 50, whatever, but we still haven't addressed where are we going to get the revenue to service that debt?
I only ask my optimum numbers, senators, because I'm actually working on some stuff to identify at least potentially half of that. But until I have, I guess, more clear and realistic expectations, I haven't brought that up yet.
Yeah.
So my hope is to be able to support it, and I'm closer to that, trying to get to that 10 million mark annually internally as opposed to a debt borrowing.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Thank
just a point of clarification. I was under the impression that if we go to the bond market for $50 million borrowing, we know that DPW's budget primarily comes out of the liquid fuel tax and territorial highway funds and whatnot, but it doesn't use up all of that. And so I think there is a little bit of cap within those funds to be able to support the bond borrowing. Am I mistaken on that assumption?
Well, no, you're correct.
Okay. I mean, so that would seem to be at least the general answer at this point in time, that there would be a little bit of money left over after providing the budget for DPW for their operations to be able to support a bond borrowing of $50 million.
We would have to, from some of the other uses would have to be paid for under a completely different source.
Okay.
Could you just repeat what those are? I know you said it already. I have it listed. It's,
Okay, the street lights are costing us $2 million. Well, no, 1.6.
1.6. Mm-hmm.
DPW costs us 11.9. GCC is 278. Rapid Transit is 3.2. The mayors get 2. No, but I mean, but still fund it. But okay, so we'll figure out somewhere. And okay, with that, it's 4:00. I want to thank everybody for coming in. If everybody would just give us some initial drafts, we'll have another draft and maybe have another roundtable. Okay, thank you. We stand adjourned.
Now I get it. This is just